Morgen, good morning. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Bruchim Abayim to one and all. We're in the middle of the Maimer of Yadait, Tafresh Nun Zayin. We're at page Nun Aleph. So we explained last time that one of the expressions, well-known expressions in Teres Hanister, in the world of Kabbalah and Chassidus, is the expression known as Mokum HaCholol, the empty space, or even a more accurate translation is the vacuum. Cholol means empty, like Velibi Cholol Bekirbi in Tehillim, my heart is empty, hollow within me. I think even in modern Hebrew they call outer space the Chalal, right? Ches Lamed Lamed, because there's a lot of space there. And the background of this expression is the Arizal's formulation of the doctrine of Tzimtzum, that prior to the creation of the world, the Ein Sof, the light of the Ein Sof, the presence of infinity, Haya Memale Kol Makam HaChalol. It filled the entire expanse of what would later become the universe. And there was no space for any of the universes because it was all filled with infinity. And in order for there to be a universe, there had to be what he calls a Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum, Tzadik Mem, Tzadik Vav Mem, Tzimtzum, or in English, Tzim, Tzum, not a Chinese dish, Tzimtzum, but Lahavdil. And the concept of Tzimtzum is a form of restriction or withdrawal, the first withdrawal symptoms in history. And the withdrawal that was necessary was a so-called withdrawal of infinity, creating a makam hachalal, creating an empty space, a space that was devoid, at least in its own perception, of the infinite presence. So that over there, a space can be formulated, can be developed, a space for the world and for all of the universes. That is called the makam hachalal. That's the appreciate the expression that he's going to be using now, the empty space. That's, so to speak, the space from where the Ein Sof withdrew, so to speak. It had to restrict itself. It had to limit itself, creating a space where there could be a world, and many, many worlds, spiritual worlds, and ultimately our own physical universe governed by time and space, physical space. But really, any form of space goes into that form, that term of makam hachalal. The space of emptiness. Emptiness of what? Emptiness of the complete manifestation and presence of the Ohr Ein Sof, which wouldn't allow, so to speak, for anything outside of it, because if infinity is manifested, so infinity excludes any other reality outside of infinity unless it's part of infinity. In order for there to be a world that has some form of autonomy, some form of identity, some form of finiteness, some form of independence, again, depends which layer of consciousness, but even the highest world, certainly the lowest world, there had to first be the makam hachalal, creating the empty space.
In a sense, can't
Yeah.
the Eibishter do finite and infinite and finite and like this is really in human terms, just in human terms we're describing, or
You're asking an interesting question. That the logic that infinity excludes finiteness is a logical idea. Couldn't God get around that logic, and therefore not do the tzimtzum?
Is time also
according to this, time is also created. Yeah, the time and space go usually together. Makam and Zman. Makam is space, Zman is time. So it's a creation of time and space as well. It's a very good question you're asking. I'm not going to touch on it at length. I'm just going to touch on one point, and that is, generally speaking, the way Torah understands is that even though Hashem is beyond logic and can do anything, but generally the system of creation was one that in many instances adhered to the system of logic that God created. And there's a reason for that too. So even though you're right, you can get around all of it because in other words, logical terms themselves, logic itself is a creation. So if logic itself is a creation, so why would you impose any logical principles on that which preceded the creation of logic, right? The question of why is a logical question, but it only exists in a world where things have to adhere to a why. In other words, it's a world of sense, it's a world of logic which is in itself created. That's your question, and it's a wonderful question.
Where did the Arizal get his?
So all I'm addressing now is, I'm not elaborating on it, I'm just addressing the one point that from a Torah perspective, and it also has to be explained, why would Torah assume this even? Generally speaking, the system of creation adheres to a system. It adheres to a certain system. The reason for that will become clear a little later here. So that's why the Arizal says, according to the system, Ein Sof means infinity. In a space of infinity, in a space where infinity is manifest, there's no space for anything else. In fact, there's no even space for space. There's no space even for the very concept of space. Because if infinity fills everything, so then everything is infinite. So the Tzimtzum allowed there to be what's called space. Space for something outside of infinity, at least in its own perception. That's this expression, Makam Achal. What's the point here that we're making? That the doctrine of Tzimtzum is one of the most fundamental doctrines in the world of Jewish mysticism. The Arizal formulated in his sefer called Eitz Chaim and in other of his svarim, but Eitz Chaim is considered his magnum opus, so to speak. And in the opening of Eitz Chaim, Tree of Life, he formulates right in the beginning, Shar Aleph, Perek Aleph, he introduces this doctrine of Tzimtzum, but it's one that pervades all of the svarim, all of the literature of Teres HaKabbalah, Teres HaNister, since the days of the Arizal, and it's a certain understanding of the world. How we understand the world, which is what we would call a post-Tzimtzum reality. A reality that exists in a post-Tzimtzum state. What was the whole conversation here? That essentially, all of Tzimtzum, the concept is rooted in Shem Elokim, versus Gilui is rooted in Shem Havaya. That's what we've been discussing. Oir and Kli, which is similar. Oir means the full expression, and Keli is the container, the limited expression. We spoke about the whole mashal with the teacher and the student at length. What was the conclusion? That the concealment is only on one side, only from the student's perspective, not from the teacher's perspective. And even from the student's perspective, the teacher is not trying to conceal, the teacher is trying to reveal. In order to reveal, you have to hold back. And he's putting into the metaphors and into the brevity, into the short messages, he's putting everything, so that after 40 years, the student can hopefully unravel the full depth and splendor and majesty and grandeur of the message and get back to the original message that is undiluted, that is not concealed. So now we can understand a little bit how that applies to the Nimshal. So now let's go back to the Nimshal and see how it applies to the Nimshal. So we'll start Nun Aleph from the line that starts Kanal, like 10 or 15 lines from the top. The line starts Kanal, Chof Nun Lamed, period. This will be able to help us understand Kivayachal, Lamaila, how it is by Hashem. The Legabe Ein Sof. When we speak of Ein Sof means the light, the manifestation, the energy of the Infinite One. Ein Shum Tzimtzum V'Hester Klal. There's no real restriction or concealment of the full divine energy. Why? The Ein Sof Nimtza, but Makam HaChalal, La'achirat Tzimtzum K'may Kaidam HaTzimtzum. Those are important words. When the Arizal said that there's a makam hachalol, there's an empty space, and over there only a little trickle of divine energy could come in to sustain the universes, to create the universes, because if the full Ein Sof was there can't be a world. Just like the teacher who unleashes everything he knows on the poor student, there's nothing left. The guy shuts down, the kid, the boy, the young man shuts down because it's overwhelming. It's daunting. He doesn't have the kalim for it. He just has to shut down, or he gets a migraine headache, or he runs out of class, or he puts down his head in the classic response. Here, it's not just the shear is too deep, so I get a headache, or I don't know what I'm talking about. I failed the test. Here, you're talking about the world can't emerge. the finite world can't emerge in the presence of Ein Sof, which is why he explained that the teacher only has to give a little, has to filter and screen out most of the light, and only allow a little trickle of it, a little flow, a restricted flow, to be able to be narrowed down and custom made to the student. And even that has to be enclosed and manifested in garments and decorations and allegories and parables. Again, each student according to his or her capacity. So in the Nimshal, what would that mean? The Nimshal would mean if the Ein Sof was fully present, as we said before, if the Oir was not diminished, it was not mitigated, it was not diluted, it was not restricted or concealed in any way, it's not be'erech tala olamus. It's not commensurate. It's not tailor-made to the worlds. Every world is based on two things. Identity. There's an I. And number two, finiteness. Oir, Ein Sof, by its definition, is bilti balgvul, is definitionless. Did I just make up a word? Yes. Okay. It lacks it has no definition. And it is infinite. And it is indivisible. And the finite and the infinite are not a match for each other. So on one hand, you need the expression of Shem Havaya to create a world, like we explained. You can't activate, you can't do without it. There has to be some expression. On the other hand, the expression can't be fully, because then it will not allow for the existence of that universe. The universe is based on some form of identity, of some form of finiteness. And therefore, what you needed is Shem Elokim to filter it. So what is the world getting? The world is receiving from Kavayachal, from Hashem, a very restricted, diluted energy that allows it to be it. And even that comes garbed in metaphors and parables so that the world should be able to contain it according to its capacity. But now that we explained that even in the mashal, the concealment is only on one side, not on the other side. The teacher sees in the brevity the whole depth, and in the mashal, the nimshal. Here too it means that the Ein Sof, the Oir Ein Sof, that's what he says, Ein Shum Tzimtzum V'Hester Klal. Legabe the Oir, there's no Tzimtzum, the Oir Ein Sof Nimtzum V'Makam HaChalal, La'achra Tzimtzum K'may Koydem HaTzimtzum. The Oir Ein Sof is present in the empty space, post-Tzimtzum, just like before Tzimtzum, without a difference. K'may Shekasov, and this is the meaning of the pasuk. Es HaShamayim V'Sa'aretz Ani Molei. I fill heaven and earth. Uksiv the Navi says, Hayisaser ish b'mistarim v'ani lo yerenu. Will a man hide and I will not see him? It doesn't only mean that you can't hide, in other words, that God can see you from on top. It means shegam la'achar kala alemes v'esteidim. Means that even after all of this series of concealments, nimtza ha'or de'in seif baruch hu b'chol makom. The Oir of Ein Sof is present everywhere, in every space, in the expression of the Zohar, Le'sasar ponui minei klal. No space is devoid of him at all. When we say devoid of him, we don't only mean devoid of his providence, or devoid of an energy. We mean devoid of him. The full Ein Sof, just like pre-Tzimtzum, is not compromised. The full Ein Sof is there in the Makam HaChalal, in that very space where the world exists on its terms. Just like for the teacher, those very messages that the student may receive because they're restricted, for him the full intensity is there. It's just concealed in a way that the student can absorb it on his level. But that concealment, as we said, is only from one side. From the teacher, there was never a concealment because he started from inside out. He sees in the brevity the full depth. In the mashal, he sees the full nimshal.
So he's taking a side now this four-sided argument? He's taking the extreme position, right? I mean, is that mashmosi?
So this is very much connected with the position that tzimtzum is shaloi kipshutai. What do we mean shaloi kipshutai? That even though we say that, Rizal says that the oir had to go through a tzimtzum, it withdrew in order to create a finite space, and only a finite light could go into the world. So you can't compare pre-tzimtzum reality to post-tzimtzum reality. Post-tzimtzum reality is based on a finite light. Pre-tzimtzum reality is infinite light. Says this Maimer, the Rebbe explains in this Maimer, that's only from the perspective of the recipient. But from the perspective of the mashpia, like from the perspective of the teacher, legabe itself, there's no tzimtzum at all. The same Ein Sof that was fully present, pre-tzimtzum is fully present. Post-tzimtzum, what he calls in the makam hachalal, in the empty space, where l'cha'ira the Ein Sof is not present. Just like from the teacher's perspective back to the mashal doesn't restrict anything, because he sees in the mashal the entire nimshal. The mashal is not concealing the nimshal. It's all fully there. Why does he have to do it then? Because he's dealing with a student. He wants the student should absorb it. But it's not like the teacher really gets blocked out and is like, oh, he forgot everything just because he's explaining the Mishnah or the Gemara in a simple way. So all the depth is gone. The full depth is there. And as we will see, it's even present in the communication. It just allows for the screening that the student should be able to absorb it according to his capacity.
What is the Kipshuto response to that? What would be the argument the other way around?
Uh-huh.
Unless you don't want to do it. It's a paradigm.
The other view says that gvul is gvul. that in this world there's a kav, there's a line, there's a trickle. And I mean, when we say finite, it doesn't mean it's not so finite. It's pretty awesome. I just want to say when it says finite, it's not that finite. It accomplishes quite a magnificent feat, to put it mildly. But it means, in other words, that the tzimtzum did affect something in the oir. That the oir went through a transition, a transformation. Where tzimtzum shaloi kipshutai, in terms of oir, is that the post-tzimtzum and pre-tzimtzum reality is exactly the same. As I mentioned, there's another question of tzimtzum, and that is if the tzimtzum was in the oir or in the moyer, in the Hashem. So that's not the discussion now. That's just a whole other discussion. If there was a tzimtzum in the moyer, so to speak, in God Himself. Here he keeps on referring to the word oir, which will be clear also. The word oir would be like the message of the teacher. It's like the energy of the teacher, the ideas of the teacher. The oir is present fully. In other words, in oir also the tzimtzum is not kipshutai.
I mean, there's still going to be work ahead in the sense that
of course.
even with the teacher and the student, there was the concept of koyim, the Talmud on
Of course, that's why we say there was a tzimtzum. The Maimon is not saying there was no tzimtzum. The tzimtzum has to accomplish something. It's not a futile endeavor.
It's a difficult koyim to Rabbi. We don't. I mean,
of course, the tzimtzum has its effects. It has major effects. The point is, however, just like the teacher's tzimtzum has a major impact. And this is also the meaning of the pasuk in Tehillim in Kuf Lamed Tes. Im esak, it's a very, very famous and beautiful words of David HaMelech. Im esak shamayim shamata, va'atzia sha'oil hineka. If I go up to heaven, I climb up to heaven, you're there. Va'atzia sha'oil. If I go down to the abyss, who do I find? Hineka, you're also there. David HaMelech says. So in esak means ascend, right? If I ascend to heaven, I reach the highest places, you're there. Va'atzia sha'oil, atzia comes from the word like mita mutzas, a stretched out mattress or bed. Va'atzia, the person descends and, so to speak, ends up laying in the sha'oil. Sha'oil is the abyss. Hineka, you're there. And he continues, if I have wings and I end up at the other side of the sea, you're also there. Gam sham yadcha seichazen. Over there you'll also hold me. Gam choshech lo yachshik mimeka Even in the greatest darkness, the darkness will not be a partition that will block you. What is the theme that David HaMelech is conveying here in Tehillim? The gam b'sha'oil ve'eretz tziyah v'tzalmavas, that even in the abyss, even in the earth, even in tziyah v'tzalmavas, tziyah is a place that's barren, it's parched. Like we say, tzamalecha nafshi, kamalecha b'sari, be'eretz tziyah v'oyef, b'li mayim, right? A land that is parched, that is thirsty, there's no water. So a place of tziyah, it's parched, there's nothing there. But Tzalmavas is like Gam Ki'elch Begeit Tzalmavas. Tzalmavas is the shadow of death. Tzeil Mavas, a place where there's the shadow of death. Meaning, even in a place of the abyss, B'Bchinas Tachlis Hahelam V'Ester, what appears to be the ultimate place of concealment, a person should know Gam Sham Nimtza Eidin Sefer, that the tzimtzum is only from one perception, but the truth is that the full presence of the infinity is there, right there with him. There's never ever a point of real detachment. Never. And that's why David HaMelech says, Imesek Shamayim Shamata. Ayatzia Sha'el. It's the exact opposite. Also Hineka. Because Gam Choshech Lo Yachshek Mimeka. You say there was a tzimtzum, but Mimeka Gam Choshech Lo Yachshek. The difference is the perception of how I perceive the reality. But the truth is that right here, right now, I can access because it's present. There's the full, how much I can access, okay, that's already, again, a person has to be, this is an avoida. But the Ein Sof, the full Ein Sof is present. V'chola helim, the entire concealment, hurak legabi hanevroyim. She'enam royim hagilu yodein Sof. The difference is, Lagabi the Nevraim, those who were created, that in the post-Tzimtzum reality, what we call Sha'oil, what we call the Chalol, they don't perceive the Gili of Ein Sof Baruch Hu. Aval Chuli, Aval Lagabi Ein Sof Baruch Hu, Ein Shum Helam V'Ester Klam. But Lagabi the there's absolutely no concealment. The Tzimtzum did not change anything. Absolutely not. Just like it was before the Tzimtzum. That's where his words, that Ein Sof Nimtza B'Makam HaChalol Achra Tzimtzum HaKaydam HaTzimtzum. So when the Arizal and all the Sifrei Kabbalah discuss the Tzimtzum, he says it's mamish like by the Rav. What the Tzimtzum means, it looks like a Tzimtzum. It's perceived as a Tzimtzum. That's the expression Tzimtzum Einoi Kipshuta. But the truth is, it goes one step further. V'hinei be'emes ein ze hester amiti legabi hanevraim gamke. But the truth is, based on all of this, again, the mashal and the nimshal here fully match. Just like in the mashal, first he said that for the teacher it's not a concealment. Because he knows in the mashal, the nimshal. Remember, he's coming from inside out, not from outside in. And then he added and he said, and even for the student it's not a hester. Why? Because the whole point of the hester is to give, not to hold back. And even in what you gave everything, but it's a process till he discovers it. Now he goes in the nimshal as well. That legabe the nivrayim, it's also not a real hester. Now he doesn't say it's not a hester. Here he says, ain't a hester amiti. Of course it's a hester. If it wouldn't be a hester, you wouldn't need a tzimtzum. So what are you making? It's not a joke, the tzimtzum. But the point is, ain't a hester amiti. Amiti means it's not an ultimate hester. It's not a real true hester. And in parentheses, v'haba hatalya. This is not a separate nekuda. It depends on the first nekuda. Why? If it was a hester for the mashpia, if it was a concealment for the mentor, it would have been a concealment for the receiver. But because we established that for him it's not a hester. Why? Because he sees in the external the internal, and in the outer the inner, and in the trickle and the filter the full depth, and in the finite he sees the infinite. So therefore it means that even for the recipient it's not a hester. The difference is how to access it. For him it's yasher, meaning he sees it directly. He lechatchila doesn't see a difference between the two worlds. He sees the finite, he sees the infinite and the finite because the finite emerged from the infinite. In other words, for him, the finite is simply a hechitimtza of bringing down the infinite to a lower place. So it's l'chatchila, there's no tension between the two, and for the makabel there is a tension. For the makabel, first all you get is tzimtzum, helim, gvul, and now you have to go what's called oir choizer. You have to go back up and unravel how the finite is really a manifestation of infinity. So it's just you get there in two opposite directions. It's like, the two people digging the tunnel and then they meet. They get there from two opposite directions. So from one side, he doesn't have to dig because what looks like earth is not really earth. He goes straight through it. But ultimately, the two meet in the same place. Because if it was a hester legabe the mashpia, it would have been a hester legabe the makabel. Since it's not a hester legabe the mashpia, so ultimately it means that for the makabel, it's not a real hester either.
By definition, it's not possible for it to work.
Right.
If you can see from outside in, then by definition, there's
Exactly.
communication.
There's a communication, yeah. Kiyim adirabbe. Not only is it not a hester, it's the other way around. Maybe you megala so'erba madrega shalamatim. The tzimtzum itself really is not tzimtzum, it's gilui. Again, back to the teacher. Why is he giving all the mashalim? Because he wants to hold back? Why is he dressing up his ideas in such simple terms? And why is he giving so little? Because he's stingy? Because he's not interested? Because he doesn't want to forget. He doesn't want him to have his information. He wants to have the distance, so he should have the ingredient of Coca-Cola that nobody else has. The exact opposite. He's holding back because he wants to give everything. But if you give everything, you give nothing. Because you're not left with a student. You may be left with a parrot who's going to repeat words, but you're not left with a student. If you want to mentor somebody, mentorship means creating an independent person, not a person who's just repeating. That's not a student. In other words, there's a type of student who just repeats, but it's not internalized. And the difference is that student will never be able to make new students because he remains a makabel. A real student is somebody who becomes like a mashpia. In other words, to create a student means to create somebody like you, in the fact that he can also create somebody like you created, which is what people often misunderstand. In other words, a real student means that he also assumes the characteristic that he's not a student anymore. He becomes himself a teacher because you gave him not just information, you gave him also methodology, you gave him everything. But in order to give everything, you have to create a real independent person. For that, you have to recognize who the person is. This is a very, very important principle. So in order to give everything, you have to hold back. Because if not, you're just expressing yourself. You're not creating somebody else. Now again, in the teacher and the student, it's not about creating the person. It's about creating the student. Here, the information is what is creating the type of person. So therefore, Adirab, he's trying to bring down the light. So here also in the Nimshal, what's the tzimtzum? The tzimtzum is not tzimtzum. The tzimtzum is gilui. Hashem wants to bring down the Ein Sof into a lower space that can't accept the Ein Sof initially. So it's not a hester, it's really a gilui. The concealment is a way of channeling and revealing the energy, not holding back the energy. The ha'inyan and the explanation in this is the hinei mishem avaya atzma eloheyav shali is his havasailamus. Because from Shem Havaya itself, there could not be the emergence of all the worlds. Because Shem Havaya, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei represents the infinite expression of God. The infinite expression of God could not allow the emergence of all the worlds, which by definition have some finite entity to them. And therefore, the I cannot exist. The I of the world cannot exist unless you don't want any other existence, unless you want everything to melt away in infinity and everything should be infinite and just be an expression of infinity. But if you want a world, or in our mashal, you want a student, you don't just want it to be about you. You want a student, you want somebody outside, you have to recognize the parameters of that world. So he says, it's through Shem Elikim that the oir of Havaya could come out and can be revealed in the world, to make them into to bring them into existence, and then to give them chiyus. 2 points. Lahavoisa means to make them exist, but it's not only existence, it's also the continuous life and chiyus and vitality of the worlds. Because the creation itself must come from Shem Havaya, because if you only have Shem Elokim, what you have is holding back, and from holding back you can't create. Creating is about expressing. Creation comes from Havaya. But the Hagam Diksiv Bereshis Bar Elokim, the Pasuk Taka says Bereshis Bar Elokim es Hashemayim v'Saretz. In other words, the term that's used in Ma'aseh Bereshis is always Shem Elokim throughout Parshas Bereshis. Vayomer Elokim yihi vayoy, right? Vayomer Elokim yetache aretz desha. Vayomer Elokim yihi rakiv. Vayomer Elokim yihi moiris. There's a reason why Elokim, because as we're explaining, the process of creation has to happen through Shem Elokim. Huh?
That was all post-Shvius.
Yeah. But nonetheless, the Bria itself is Havaya. Even though it says Bereshis Bar Elokim, Hainu shenes Havaya dei Shem Elokim. It goes through the medium, so to speak, of Shem Elokim. In other words, the oir goes through a tzimtzum. Aval guv ve'etzem ha'ishavos. But the etzem ishavos is M'shem Havaya dafka. V'zeu the Havaya hu loshen mahava. The word Havaya, Yud, K, Vav, K, is, right, Yahava, which means brings into being. Haya, Hoive, V'yiyah, was, is. Mahava is. He's Mahava. He creates the very being, the isness, the existence of the world. The kanal, the chol pulu, bezgalus apoyol dafk. Every activity, every pu'ula that you do, even the smallest one, comes from expressing the koyach, the power, the force that activates it. By holding back, by restraint, I can't get the football to fly. I can't get the table to move. Any form of activity that I want to happen, there has to be some form of gilui koyach apoyol. On the other hand here, if there was the gilui of Havaya, then you can't have a world. So you have to have the gilui filtered and screened and mitigated through the Shem Elokim.
So is the expression of free will an example of a clue that is the Shem Elokim?
Yeah. The reason there could be free will, you're asking how is there free will? The reason there could be free will in our world is because the Tzimtzum had a major impact. In a place where infinity is fully manifested, first of all, you wouldn't have your own will, and second of all, the concept of freedom, which means autonomy and independence, wouldn't exist.
So Shalokish Pshuto would mean that I do have free will, and it is still the same independent.
Right. Yeah.
Isn't the fact that the world creates and recreates grass and pavers, it's all the time manifestation of infinity in Gashmis?
In a chaname. 100%.
You see infinity in the
Of course. Even, yeah.
That's the way it translates.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So he says, Kol pulu bizgalus hapoyel dafka, v'aynu shema havaya shubchines gilui. Because creation comes from Shem Havaya is gilui. What do we mean gilui? Gilui means it's expression. It's not holding back, it's expression. V'zeu shekasov, this is what the Pasuk says in Tehillim. We say it in the morning in Psukah de Zimra. Hashem melech, Hashem malach, Hashem yimlech. So we say Hashem. The way it's spelled out is, right, Havaya, which is Yud Kei Vav Kei. Havaya malach, Havaya melech, Havaya malach, Havaya yimlech. What's the difference? Melech is he is king. Malach is he was king. Yimlech is he will be king. He will reign. The Bebchin is Melech, present. Malach, past. Yimlech, future. Avar hoive v'asid shu b'chinas eschalkus azman shemitzad Shem Elokim. Immediately we already have a division of time. All divisions come from Elokim, including past, present, and future, because time is a product of some form of tzimtzum. Time means there is division. There's past, present, as abstract and as intangible time is, and it's pretty abstract and intangible. Nonetheless, there's something called space and time which work together. Just like we understand space, there's the east and the west. And what's in the east is not in the west, what's in the north is not in the south. It's four different directions, and there's up and there's down and so forth. Time, similarly, in a more abstract way, is also a division. It's a differentiation of past, present, and future. All this means that the energy came through Shem Elokim. Nonetheless, we say, Mikol Makom Hashem Melech U'Malach V'Yimlach. Da'akoilu Mishem Havaya. Even the Melech Malach Yimloch, which is like Bereshis Bar Elikim. It's Elikim. Even there we say Yud Kei Vavke. Which is why, at the end of Maisa Bereshis, the Pasuk says, Eila told us Hashemayim V'Aretz B'yoyim Baram B'yoyim Asois Hashem Elikim Eretz V'Shamayim. Suddenly you remembered Shem Havaya? For more than 30 verses, there's no Shem Havaya, only Shem Elikim. Everything Elikim, 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 Elikim.
That's not Ani Hashem Lo Shanisi, right?
Yeah. But suddenly at the end, because really it's all Yud Kei Vavke. It's Yud Kei Vavke, the way it's experienced through Shem Elikim, which is Midas HaTzimtzum, in order for there to be Makam, space, and Zman, time, and all the properties that exist in all of the universes, the highest until the lowest. What does this mean? The Shem Elikim represents that Shem Havaya comes into each world, shining, giving light to each world, and not only each world, every nivra in each world, to bring it into existence and to give it life. This is the life force, Mashakol Nivra Nivra Margishu Chai. Every nivra feels that it's alive. You feel that there's some life in you. It's not something we focus on much because we take it for granted, even though it's the context of everything. There's nothing without it. But how often do you stop and just focus on the fact that you're alive? Not how you're alive, not if you like your life, not if you hate your life, not how many things you have to do, not how stressed you are, not where you want to be, where you should have been, where you might be tomorrow. But just the fact, what he says, Kol Nivra V'Nivra Margishu Chai. The fact that I'm alive. That experience of life, what is that experience? That every night, it's not just talking about people. A tree also is aware, some hergish that it's alive. An animal, an insect, every mammal, every fish, every bird. Exactly how the hergish is, it's different. What does it mean? Is it a self-consciousness? Is it instinctive? Does it just act as though it feels it's alive? But there's some hergish, there's some experience of life. Again, in each creature, it's completely different than any other creature. But this experience that it's a life, what is it? What is this life? This is all divine. This is all Havaya Yudke Vavke, the divine, full divine infinity, filtered, processed through Shem Elikim, so that I could be I and experience this life and fill this life. You know, sometimes you'll say a person feels alive. What does it mean you feel alive? Are you more alive when you feel alive than when you say, I don't feel alive? Sometimes you feel this life force. What it means, when a person says, I feel alive, sometimes you just, let's say some really good stuff happened to you in your life, and I came to life, or he came to life. It's an expression, but it's also describing an authentic experience. If a person was dealing with some heartache for a long time, and then suddenly they get the good news that everything has been transformed. Exactly. For 22 years, Yaakov was living in a state of, if we could say this, diminished consciousness. Mourning and sadness and melancholy. And suddenly the blockages, a lot of the blockages were removed, and the flow of energy that's always there is now flowing without obstructions, without narrow pathway. It's not getting stuck every few minutes. Where very often a person's source of life is just always getting stuck. There's no seamless flow. Naturally, when there's no blockages, there's a flow. Havaya through Shem Elikim is just a flow. And we are the conduits through which the chiyus flows. It just flows all the time, 24 hours a day. But what happens is, various thoughts and experiences, it blocks it. It blocks it, so that takes over the life force. And like it gets stuck, It's like it gets stuck, like you're running and you trip. Here's a ditch, and here's another ditch, and here's another. And each time you fall and then you have to get out. So the life is there. The life is always flowing. But in my experience, it's going through the ditches, and I keep on getting stuck. That's what he says, Vatzia Shoil, even when you go down, he neka. So that experience of chiyus is that there's always the flow of Havaya through Shem Elikim, And that's the chiyus that is adaptable to every nivra, and it's adaptable. It's adopted. It literally, because it has to adopt the qualities and characteristics of the creation it wants to create. It does not overwhelm it, and that's why it sits within the nivra's consciousness. How can it sit within your consciousness? Because it was screened through Shem Elokim. And just like by the mashpiyah mekabel, by the mashal, the seichel that comes into the student, even though it went through the tremendous tzimtzum and helam, the restrictions and the concealments of the core of the light of the mashpiyah, and it even went through cloaks of metaphors, nonetheless, after everything. But what comes into the student? The ideas of the teacher. Itaka went through transitions and restrictions and filters and screening, but ultimately he gets through the message. Every chiyus, in other words, even the smallest ant, has some form of chiyus. It's havaya through Shem Elokim. It's receiving Shem Havaya. He's not holding back. He's giving. He's just giving it in a way that the ant's brain should be able to receive it and remain an ant and not become an angel. The mosquito should be able to be a mosquito and not become a Gan Eden alien. The bee should be able to be a bee and be. As in B, B-E-E, as in B. It should be able to be. It should be able to be a bee. And the same is true every single nivra. When I feel I'm alive, I feel that I'm alive. It's a life that belongs to me, which is why you think it's never gonna. It's forever. We don't feel it came from somewhere. It's gonna go somewhere. It's gonna diminish. When that in the kuda of life is not dependent on any circumstances. The circumstances don't allow us maybe to experience the flow of it. But when you tune into it, that feeling of life is always present. And this is the source of attentiveness to that flow of life which is beyond obstructions, and it's in each nivra according to who it is. That's why it's my feeling that I'm alive.
Is that the parallel to Kamina Shadante the Rabbi?
Not yet. No. This is not the parallel to Kamina Shadante. This is the student receiving the energy through the filter
And feeling that there's energy.
and getting the idea of the teacher through the tzimtzum.
But
Yeah.
not tracing it.
Right. No, not yet. There is also concealment here. We all know there's a major concealment, and that is the nivra does not feel it's divine. We know we're alive, but we don't feel that it's divine energy. We could be told it's divine energy, that's what he's doing here, but we don't feel it's a lakus. A person instinctively, intuitively does not feel that the divine is defining their entire entity and identity. There's a hester. In fact, a person could be fully alive and appreciate it, and yet claim that they're atheistic. They don't even believe that there is a source. They call it, there's electrical currents in the body. The body is filled with electrical currents, and that's the source of consciousness. The consciousness, the life, is basically, it's a chemical, it's just a chemical experience. Don't make it so complicated. I mean, make it complicated, but keep it in the realm of chemical complications. Chemical complexities. But he says, but even this, it's not an ultimate true concealment. Really, it's all divine energy. And a person can even experience it this way, if he really puts his mind to it. So what's the conclusion? The Hester of Elokim is not true, ultimately. It's what brings the light into a lower realm. That even in finite creatures which cannot experience the full intensity of Shem Havaya because they're finite, even they should receive Havaya. So the point of Elokim is not to block, it's to give. It's to bring Havaya into the lower world. V'hinei k'moshen is boyer le'el b'mashal d'mashpiyo makabel. Sha'makabel yuchal lovei gamkein la'oimek pnimis v'atzmis chachmas harav. But now we go to the next step. Everything is being built here. Step one is that the concealment is not a real concealment because it's the way of giving. You can't give without holding back. But just like in the mashal we said, you're not only giving, you're giving everything because ultimately the student could reach the full depth. Now is after 40 years, you're going to reach your Rebbe's mind. So now we go to the next step in the Nimshal too. The be'emes yochel kol echad ve'echad lovei. Lebchinis gilui pnimis v'atzmis ein sof l'shem havaya sh'yor begilui benafsha. That really, inherent even in post-Tzimtzum, is the capacity for every single creature to receive, to experience the full the core of Ein Sof, sh'yor begilui in the most revealed way. V'hainu idei avedos. So just like by the student, after learning 40 years, he gets back to the original information. So through the work of every creature, every person, biyagia with toil, biyagias nefesh or biyagias basa. The toil includes both mental toil, soulful toil, and also physical toil. Lahasir halemas v'astadim, to remove the concealments. Harehu bal b'chinas gili pnimi is v'atzmas ein sof machal l'mayla b'chinas chitzonis shenasa makaleilamos. He can unravel the mashal and it leads him to the nimshal, meaning within the identity of the person, he could discover the ultimate core of the infinite earth of Havaya, which is beyond the chitzonius, beyond the external ray of Havaya, which came through Elokim, that allowed there to be a world and is therefore extremely limited, but rather go back from the chitzonius into the pnimius, not just the Shem Havaya that could be a source for the worlds, like the mashal that the teacher gave for the student, but rather get back to the nimshal itself. That's the next step. That not only is the tzimtzum not a tzimtzum for the teacher, it's also not a tzimtzum for the student, because you want to give him. And even then, not only are you giving him a little part, which is also not a tzimtzum, because you want to give, but ultimately you're giving everything. So even though it starts off as a tzimtzum, because that's the only way you could fulfill its objective, there is the capacity within the tzimtzum to be able to go back to the place pre-tzimtzum, because it's like the mashal for the nimshal, where this teacher put into the mashal the full nimshal. You just have to be able to reveal it, and that's the avodah, to be able to go back from the outer back into the inner, so that Elokim ultimately doesn't conceal Havaya, but it becomes a seamless channel for Shem Havaya without tzimtzum.
But then this comes from that, just like Ammon's son.
Then there's no...
Ultimately, if you go higher,
It's not klois hanefesh, because we're talking about choizer. In other words, when you see it through the mashal, it's not klois hanefesh anymore. Klois hanefesh means when there's a sudden, overwhelming shock higher than your kalim. Here, you're going through the kalim. You understand? That's the effect of the tzimtzum. It's a different process, because you're going through the kalim. You're going through the mashal. You're seeing in the mashal the nimshal, so it's not klois hanefesh anymore. Yegiyas nefesh and yegiyas basar. Okay, believe that will be masber. Continue tomorrow, Be'ezer Hashem. Yeah.
We have the potential to go back and trace back.
Yeah.
But he described the previous stage, not that we'll be able to trace back.
Yeah, no, that
but
was the first.
We'll see the connection.
Yeah.
That we'll see that,
No.
that there is a vitality.
Yeah, no, because even in the first level, there's a difference. A student knows that the teacher is giving him the information. He's not atheistic. He's just giving him a little bit. We don't even know it's coming from Hashem. So there's like a complete detachment.
So when he says those things that was up, that would be to
Still
know
in the
that it's
first
coming
level.
from the teacher.
Yeah.
To know it's coming from the teacher.
The life that I'm experiencing is divine. That's the first thing.
Applies to teacher.
Yes.
To realize
Yes.
it all came from a teacher.
Yeah.
It's
It's not stam. I'm not just a mechanical machine.
We're still not getting
Yeah, we're not. It's not a daita der
it.
Rabbi.
It came from somebody, not a
Yeah, exactly. Like a student hearing a shiur. He attributes it to the teacher, but it's still with tzimtzum. Yes. Yeah, there's a teacher, yeah. Right. The second stage of Adaita Rabbi, he starts off with, after the period, Vihine Kamoshin is Baralel. That's why it's Vihine, it's a new stage.
Fair to say,
It allows for Teva also.
we are aware of
Yeah, yeah.
you see it in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
form of nature.
Elokim is 86, which is Hateva.
Right, that's what I'm asking.
What makes it nature? What makes it nature is that there's a tzimtzum. What makes it nature is that there's a tzimtzum. That's what we call nature. Yeah, yeah.
Well, we can perceive it.
Yeah.
Take for granted the sun curve. I did watch yesterday the London Assembly. Thank you.
Die ganze Sache. Es gab 3-4 Stunden. Wie lange ist gewesen?
Sunday. Shabbos, I was invited to my life.